Right.
Alec, the Bible only has one message. It's only one message. It's how the Lord is going to conquer death to give us life. That's it.
Okay, today I am joined with Rico Cortes from wisdomintorah.com. And Rico has been studying temple and teaching on temple and the ancient Near East for decades, I believe it is, Rico.
Yeah.
Uh, Welcome.
How are you, Alec? It's a pleasure to have. Thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. It's going to be good.
Would you mind just giving your little introduction, um, where you are, what brought you to where you're at, and interest in the temple and the Near East? And would you mind outlining some of that for us?
Absolutely. I was born in Puerto Rico, raised in California, and I was a professional baseball player for the Yankees and the Mets, and then I scouted for the White Sox for 10 years. In 1997, I moved back from Venezuela, where I was working for about 5, 6 years, and I came back to the things of God in early part of '98, started serving the Lord again. Um, I've always, since I was a kid, I've always had this infatuation, I may say, with the book of Leviticus. I never really understood why. Um, my son was at a Christian school when he was a kid, Christian high school, not high school, but elementary school. And he comes home and he's telling me, "Hey, puppy, do you know that the tabernacle had this veil and the tabernacle had this?" And I'm going like, "Oh man, he knows more about the tabernacle than I did." And I grew up in church. So I began to have an interest, always had an interest in the things of Israel, but I began to really study the temple. And my research really takes place when I ask myself one question. I say, if I want to get closer to the presence of God, how would I know the processes how to get there? And I found that the temple was the blueprint, God's sacred space, in which the Bible teaches us, how to behave in each section and how to approach Him. And that began my love and my infatuation, you can say, or, my complete focus on tabernacle, temple, focus on Leviticus. As a matter of fact, for the last 11 months, I've been focusing only on one verse, Leviticus 17:11. And out of that context has come up a whole bunch of questions that I now have 8 teachings on
Wow.
that time frame based on the questions I ask, based on that one verse. And for the better part of 2 decades now, I've been studying the temple, 15 years, ancient Near East. So it's something that I'm passionate about. I'm grateful that I have a good teacher who's been teaching me a lot about the temple. And it's probably the best investment I've ever made because of time, obviously, because the Bible centers around worship and it centers around the book of Leviticus. And it's outlined for us exactly how God wants us to approach Him in behavior, how you deal with your neighbor, how to observe the feast, even while we eat. So the blueprint of worship is found in the book of Leviticus. So I've decided that in the next 10 years, that's going to be my sole focus of emphasis. Now that I have a context of the ancient Near East, or now that I have Greco-Roman context that I've been studying for the last 6 years, I think I'm able to handle better some of the nuances that are there because I'm comparing with ancient Near Eastern documents, contrasting different temples and how the ancients did their thing and what the message that God wants to convey through His temple. So I highly encourage people to get into it.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. So, and that was one of the questions. So, would you be able to define sacred space for us? Like,
Yeah, I mean, It's very simple for everyone to really understand this because even in your own home, you have delineated spaces. You have the family room, then you have the living room. Some people have two different living rooms. They have the one that the family watches TV, and they're the ones that you welcome guests if you have that kind of house. And
Right.
then you have a guest room that is sacred space for the visitor. And it's quite interesting because, when you visit people and they let you stay in their homes, they assign you the room and they tell you this is your room for the time you're here, and this is your bathroom. And it's peculiar because if the owner of the home needs something from that particular room, they knock on your door and they ask permission if they can come into your room, but yet they own it.
Right.
The marriage room is is actually sacred in the sense that covenantal people sleep on that bed, you
Right.
know. So we already understand sacred space, but we never transfer that into God's definitions of sacred space and its rules. For example, the word kadosh, anything that is under the legal banner of holiness carries uh, rules of conduct. It's not, oh, that's holy. No, no, no. Once God describes it and defines it and establishes it as holy, it comes with rules. It comes
Right.
with a separating ritual of liminal phase or rite of passage that makes it from profane, common, to holy. So, sacred space is really simple to define because we live in it all the time. For example, I go to the post office in the United States, and you cannot have a weapon. Is prohibited.
Hmm.
So that is sacred space
Right.
for the post office not to have weapons in it. So God's house and the temple functions the same way. God has
Okay.
certain rules from different liminal phases and different places that people can approach, even what to wear, how to behave, and things like that. And unfortunately, we have been removed from the environment of understanding sacred space. And this is the reason why many people have arguments about the temple and controversies about priesthood, and they don't quite seem to grasp God's definition of what sacred space should be.
Okay.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And so another question I have, so the other cultures also had temples and sacred space. So there's similarities. Are there also contrasts in that?
Absolutely. Look, sacred space is prevalent in all ancient societies. We are the people that today we don't put emphasis in that. Like, let me give you an example. Even today in India, in certain sections of India, not everywhere, but some sections, you have the Dalit, which are the lowest caste. Then you have the Brahman, which is the highest caste. Well, it was a custom in India that for the Dalit, which is basically the broken ones, the lowest caste in their society, if they're going to go through a community where they have Brahmin, they have to take off their shoes. They have to walk barefooted. They cannot sit at their same table. They cannot sit in the same level. I mean, that is basically them respecting sacred space. Ancient cultures had that. The Greeks would have understood. That's why the conquering of the temple in Jerusalem and placing a pig on the altar in the time of Antiochus basically developed this huge civil war
Right.
because the Greeks understood that there would have been a desecration of sacred space for the Jewish people.
Right.
So therefore, they knew that it would cause a huge problem. I mean, uh, people ask me all the time, well, how would the people in Israel in the first century would know if someone is actually circumcised to go into the temple? Because there were signs outside in the soreg, which is the fence before they enter the temple area, that will prohibit anyone who's not circumcised to cross a threshold. And people
Right.
ask, well, how will the Levites know if if that guy was legit? I mean, it's not like they're going to check the circumcision
Right.
because they all understood sacred space. And someone from another religion will go to Jerusalem. They knew, according to their mythology, according to their fears and all that, that you don't cross that sacred space because
Right.
that to them that meant curses of their gods. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
because
that's
they
why,
believed in many, so but they don't want to step on the toes of a god.
yeah.
Okay.
And it's amazing because then you have Titus or Pompey, and they destroy the temple and they come in and they put images in the Holy of Holies and they put an eagle in the temple. I mean, that is defiling sacred space. The equivalent of today is still practiced by the Muslims, by the way, is
Right.
that a Muslim will take a church and they'll make it into a mosque. And to the Middle Eastern religion, that is shaming the Christian church
Right.
because they actually now saying they're praying to their God in a location that once belonged to a church, to a different God, is basically lording over that religion. That's what happened in Turkey. One of the biggest mosques used to be a huge church from the time of the Constantinople, you know, and that's why we have the golden dome on top where the temple was. It's a way of shaming.
Hmm.
The temple of Jupiter was there first, and then after that, the Byzantine period, they put in a church, and then the Muslims come in and they conquer and they take over and put the golden dome. So all of that is basically profanation, profaning sacred space, which everyone would have understood, but Americans today don't understand that. And
Right.
people from the Middle East come in and do all the things that to them signifies power, honor to the religion, shame, and perception of weakness of
Hmm.
the enemy, and Americans don't get it. And eventually
Right.
they're going to go like, wait a minute, how these people rose up? Because you never
Right.
saw the signs and you never saw the steps
Yeah.
that they were taking in
The
order to
context
shame
that's
you.
happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Contrasting. And that's
Okay.
why prophetically right now, you don't need to be uh, an expert in certain things in the Bible, but if you study the ancient Near East and you study the Bible, then you can see the Muslim religion, and you know that the whole purpose is profaning your sacred space, your constitution, your country, your places of worship, your citizenship. Even the women, they rape them. That's a sign of shaming to establish
Hmm.
their sacred space, imposing on your land.
Right. And so a thought I had there. So Antiochus with the pig. So everything they did had something to do with their religion or their gods. Is that fair there? So what was like, I know from the fact that pig is unclean and then to bring that in, that's like a big no-no. But what was the application from Antiochus's side? Like, would that be, is there more to that from his religion? I just a thought
Uh,
I had.
I believe so. You got to remember also that the pig, when it was different types of the Hittites, for example, they used to sacrifice horses or a pig. Um, Pigs in the ancient Near East are not very much welcome because of the type of environment they live in. But in certain religions, it was done to the underworld deities. It
Oh,
was
okay.
basically an offering for the apothopreg worship, and therefore putting a pig on the altar of God, which, by the way, the altar is holy, is really is implying that they're worshiping the God of the underworld in the temple of God. And the temple of God is all about sacred space that represents life. That's
Mm,
why there was never any connection with death in the temple.
right.
You know,
Okay.
even something simple as the
Mm,
priests not letting their hair long, because the long hair and shaving of the beard was actually a sign of mourning. That's why they're not to pull their beards. That's why
right.
they're not to rend their garments. That's why in
Right.
the temple, to preserve God's sacred space, the only offering that was eaten by the people at night was the Passover lamb when the temple was standing. But none of the other offerings would be eaten, would be slaughtered at night. You
Okay.
know, they have to be slaughtered within 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon because of the perception of the underworld worship.
Wow,
Very
that's
important.
interesting.
Even something simple as, you know, the location of the lamb for the communal offering in the morning.
Hmm.
They do it in a particular place northwest of the altar, and then in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, they will do it northeast of the altar. They will slaughter it there because the
Okay.
sun was always giving light to to that offering. It could not be in the shade. That's how serious sacred
Hmm.
space preservation was, and the perception
Right.
of we don't worship the underworld.
Okay. Wow, that's really fascinating. Um, okay, so with the Garden of Eden, we'll go back there. So the Garden of Eden with God walking with Adam, this would be, if am I wrong, this is sacred space where Adam is walking with God, right?
Absolutely. And the reason why Adam is able to walk with God is because the garden is the ultimate location of life. Death is not present. So therefore,
Hmm.
Adam was created to live forever because what separates humanity from God is death. And that's the whole message the Bible. Look, I
Right.
like the Bible only has one message. It's only one message. It's how the Lord is going to conquer death to give us life. That's it. And
Hmm.
then every story is relating that with different people in the story, with David, with Solomon, with Joseph, with Judah, with Aaron, with Moses, with Noah, with Adam. I mean, it's the same story. That's why the book of Genesis begins the way the book of Revelation began. I'm sorry. The way the book of Genesis begins the way the book of Revelation ends. It
Hmm.
ends with the
The
garden.
garden. Yeah.
And the book of Revelation begins the way the book of Genesis ends, with the dispersion. Even the
Okay.
book of Exodus. The book of Exodus begins with the exile, oppression, exile, shame, right? And then it finishes with what? With the tabernacle, sacred space restored, that the presence of God came back down after they were redeemed. And then no, they could not worship God because the presence was so heavy. And so the message of God is only one and one only. His desire is to restore the cosmos. Because and we've known the verse, because God so loved the world. But in the
Mhm.
Greek it says cosmos,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Because God so loved the cosmos that he
Right.
gave his only begotten son, whomever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. So once I understood that the biblical narrative is only trying to point to one solution for one problem that even the temple cannot solve, which is
Mm.
death. But the
Right.
temple can teach you the master plan of how God will still want to have communion with you or have a relationship, even though you've had connection with death. There were rituals, liminal phases, and rites of passages that would allow you to have fellowship with Him again. So the temple is teaching you that, yes, there's a distinction. You have to go through a process of purification to come into sacred space. And if you touch something with death, God is not going to throw you in hell. He says, you live in the real world. I'm still going to allow you to approach me.
Hmm.
Ultimately, that problem will be solved by the burial, death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua, in which now we have access, to eternal life, because now death no longer has authority over our lives. It's the ultimate sacred space.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot.
It's a long-winded one. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Um, yeah, so life and death. So in the garden too, he said, the day you eat of it, you will die, right? So they sinned, they disobeyed, they were cast out, but that they were now dying in a sense too. So is that dying can't exist there? Is that, am I getting something there or am I off?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole idea of the temple. The
Okay.
temple is a microcosm of the garden. As a matter of fact, the temple was designed as a garden, and death cannot prevail. As a matter of fact, when you read chapter 3 of the book of Genesis, towards the end of the chapter, it actually tells you that God set cherubims to guard the way to a tree of life, to keep Adam from extending his arm and eating of the tree of life and live forever.
Hmm.
I mean, and then you see the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 4, verse 2, in which it says there'll be a new Jerusalem, verse 4, I think it is, can't remember. And he says, and then the tree of life will be there providing fruit. The 12, uh,
Hmm.
every
12
12 for the 12 months
for the healing of the
for the
nation.
healing of the nations.
Yeah,
Well, healing from what? What is the virus all of humanity has? Death.
death. Yeah.
That's the real message in the Bible, is
Hmm.
that God came to show humanity that he would devour death and make us sacred space. And that's the reason why we have been sealed with his Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
Because now death has no dominion. That
Okay.
means we still die, but we have the
Yeah.
hope of resurrection.
Yes. So we had the garden, they have death is introduced. So then we move along to Moses where they erect the tabernacle. So they're reestablishing this connection, this sacred space. Um, so Moses is setting in place through yeah the priests, and they're kind of, are they curating space or making it, what is their role exactly in that, bringing it
Yeah.
about?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. If you go back to Genesis chapter 2, when Adam is placed in the garden, which is the motif of resurrection, by the way. You have Adam in chapter 1 and 2. He is just dust, he is shaped into a human. And then it says that God breathed on him the breath of life.
Hmm.
That's like the Spirit of God. Breathing, bringing life. That's a resurrection motif. And then he puts him in the garden. He places him in sacred space. And then he gives him a mandate. He gives him a function and a role to guard and to keep. Now, the same word as to guard, to keep, is actually avodah, to work, right?
Okay.
The word avodah is the same word that is used in the temple describing the job of the priest. Now, think about it. If the temple is a microcosm of the garden, and the priests, they live at a higher level of holiness than anybody else in Israel, then their function is to show Israel what their job would have been if Adam didn't sin. You see,
Okay.
that's why they were white. They wore white garments, and
Mhm.
everything represented life. So the temple and the role of the priest should have been actually showing what Adam was supposed to be. And humanity was supposed to be a nation of priests. Then
Mhm.
later on, Israel was going to be made a nation of priests. Then they worship the golden calf. And then God says, okay, I'll select the Levites. And out of the Levites, I'll select the priests to get closer to me. So you have three tiers of holiness. The nation is holy, Israel.
Mhm.
But the Levites are holier than the Israelites. The Levites are holy. But then the priests are holier than the Levites. And then there's a high priest. The high priest is holier than all his brothers, the priests, the Levites, and all of Israelites. So just like the tabernacle, court of the Gentiles, court of the women, court of Israel, court of the priests, I mean the Levites, the priests, and then the Holy of Holies. Everything is consistent, even on Mount Sinai. You have sacred space. In Exodus 19, verse 12 to 11 to 12, God specifically tells them, put a boundary around the mountain, lest you die. Don't even touch it. Sacred
Mhm.
space. 70 elders plus Moses and Joshua went up with them onto the mountain. But then the 70 elders, they stayed in a particular place. Then Joshua and Aaron and Moses went up with Moses to another place. And then only Moses went up on the mount, on the cloud. The same thing. There's really nothing new.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we're not making those connections.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, lots of information. It's good. Okay, so and so with that establishment of the tabernacle, they have the sacred space returned. Eventually, we get to where David says we should have a temple, if I'm getting that correctly.
Yeah.
Was was the so that I guess I'm wondering the transition from tabernacle to temple, and could you speak to why that would be important or what's happening in that
Well, I mean, consider
situation?
the geographical location where they're located when they leave Egypt. They're in the wilderness. They are moving. Uh, Tabernacles, in the sense of a camp, is not anything new. The Egyptians, there's evidence of the Pharaoh when he will go on a war campaign that his tent was in the middle of the camp for obvious reasons, for security, for safety. Um, Once they enter the land, however, now it's permanent. So now God is saying, I'll show you the place where I'll put my name.
Right.
Gilgal, they were there for 14 years. They had the tabernacle. Then they went to Shiloh, and then the structure begins to change. The roof was textile, but then the walls was of stone. Okay, and then you have to consider population explosion. Now they're not just in a camp in the wilderness. Now they're scattered amongst the land of Israel in their ancestral lands, and then they have to come up. You have people multiplying all the time, so now you have to expand the courts to facilitate for more offerings, for some of the rituals that requires for the people to be there. So it's logistics. Um,
Okay.
I think David wanting to do a temple is extremely significant, which, by the way, it answers the question later on in the book of Revelation, also Ezekiel and Zechariah, when we see when the second coming of Messiah, that there will be a restoration of a temple. People don't understand that. But if you follow ancient Near Eastern history, and this is why ancient Near Eastern contrasting with those cultures is extremely important, because every great king of the ancient world, they were called temple builders. The king of Assyria did it. The king of Egypt did it. The king of the Hittites did it. The king of the Mesopotamians did it. Now, what did that mean to them? In order for them to be legitimized as a true king of their gods, building a temple for them give them legitimacy in the eyes of the people, because the duties of kings was to bring righteousness and justice, to bring the good news of peace, and also bring a temple or build a temple by destroying the previous temples of their enemies, putting upon those structures that they destroyed the sovereignty and the honor of their own God. Now,
Hmm.
King Saul never cared about a temple. Not once does King Saul ever cared to build a temple. The tabernacle was there in the city of Nob,
Hmm.
but he didn't really care too much,
Hmm.
you know, to do that. Only David, when he took power, he says, wait, I need to build a temple. It was a way to legitimize his kingship, and the duty of the kings was to be temple builders. And this is pretty much prevalent in the ancient Near East. So when Messiah returns and he is following in biblical sequences of events, then clearly a temple will be built, because the
Okay.
one who makes them legitimate is the Father who sent them. And it doesn't do away whatsoever with his role, his purpose, and his function. It only establishes him as the only legitimate king when he reestablishes God's temple in the abomination of desolation. Get it? So he
Hmm.
destroys the enemy and he builds God's temple,
Right.
meaning that the God of creation is the God of Israel, no one
Hmm.
else.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, a question. So you had talked about, so it's all about life, right? Now, so how does then the sacrifices fit in there? Because I think out of the gate, people would think the temple's about life, but a lot of times in our modern ears, the sacrifices are hard for people to take.
Yeah, that is very true. Let me define the terms. Let me ask you, put you in the spot a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Okay. When you hear the word sacrifice, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, to my mind, like sacrifice, I think of like the lamb getting slaughtered.
Right, but means what to you? What does it represent to be a sacrifice? What is the first thing that in the Western mind people think about?
To be a sacrifice is to like give something up or to put something else first or
right? Which represents that that animal needs to suffer what?
suffer.
Death.
Yes.
Death. So in the Western world, you say the word sacrifice is always connected with death.
Right.
But in the Hebrew word korban, it doesn't mean that.
Okay.
The word korban, which is offering,
Hmm.
is actually means to draw near. And the reason why it doesn't represent death is because the slaughtering of that animal is not the purpose, it's not the death of the animal, because the meat of that animal, if it's on certain offerings, will be the food source for the priests and their families
Right.
and the Levites. Okay? So
Okay.
they need to eat.
Yes.
But what really is important about that slaughtering, that is sacred space and ritual, that is not considered a death. Why? Because the blood of that animal touches the altar. And the moment that blood touches the altar, it becomes a ransom. Now it's the life and the blood of the animal that draws you near to God. Not the way that it was done in the ancient world, that it was the death of the animal and the blood of those animals protecting from demonic spirits. Very different.
Hmm.
So when you don't know the contrast between the way they believed in the ancient world versus the purpose and the function within the temple, then obviously to us in the Western world, we're going to thinking, oh, that's about death. Jesus died for us. Wait a minute. What does the death of Yeshua represent? Was it his death that saved us? Or was it his blood that purified us or purified
Hmm.
so that we can come near the Lord now?
Right. The
Now,
offering of his blood that he brought his blood
exactly.
as an offering.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
in the Exodus experience, when you think about the Exodus in Egypt, people, what's more important, the lamb or the blood of the lamb? By and large, every Christian will say, well, the lamb. I said, no. It was the blood that protected them from the destroyer.
Hmm.
So basically, the offering system of offerings is connected with blood in that it gives life, because God said himself in Leviticus 17:11 that he will see to himself to bring a ransom, to bring an atonement for your souls, to bring you closer. And that's the key people need to understand, that the offerings are a way to come near the Lord. It's not about the death of the animal, it's about the blood of the animal that allowed you to keep the relationship intact.
Okay.
It's a complete different understanding. And unfortunately, my brother, in the systems of religion, the study of the offerings and the temple is null and void. So that's why they don't really grasp some of these concepts, and it's kind of sad because it teaches us about the whole premise of the reason why Yeshua came. He even told us, "I did not come to be served; I came to serve and be a ransom for many."
Hmm.
It's His blood who
Right.
became the ransom for us, because now we have freedom from the slavery of death.
Right. And I did recently I did read that I forget who it was, but they were talking about the thinking about atonement and sacrifice, and that's what they were saying, that we often think about the crucifixion, but then he started wondering about the actual offering, like when he offered the blood, like after, like not like, is that making sense to it?
Well, I mean, this is the thing that, for example, why does the book of Hebrews is the only book that mentions Yeshua as a high priest? I mean, no one ever does except the book of Hebrews.
Hmm.
So, what is the purpose of him dying, and what is the purpose of his blood? And the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, actually tells you that his death frees us, gives us freedom, right? Because in Numbers, chapter 35, there's a legal precedent unique to Israel other than the ancient Near East. No one else has it. It's called the cities of refuge. When someone commits a involuntary manslaughter, he's a criminal. He killed someone, but his intent was not to kill him. It was an accident. He can go into a city of refuge, and there, as long as the high priest is alive, he he can be in safety. But the moment the high priest dies, now that person who committed a crime goes free, and the avenger of the blood, the family member of the person who died, cannot touch him. So, can we say that the death of Yeshua, it presented as a high priest, now frees us from transgression, just like Hebrews 9:15 says? So then you ask the other question: what does the blood of Messiah then represent? Well, the blood of Messiah now is what ratifies. It binds together the covenant. Is the ransom, because the blood represents the life. So now everything works perfectly in unison with purpose and function. And unfortunately, without understanding the temple service, we're not going to see these things, because unfortunately, we're not exposed to the function. And I keep saying function and purpose on purpose,
Right.
because I want the audience to recognize the importance of understanding these foundational principles.
Okay.
So we talk about the blood of Jesus, but, well, he died for all my sins. Wait a minute. I could take you to Leviticus chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 16, and I will show you that there was forgiveness for sins.
Okay.
So what do we need Jesus for? I mean,
Mm,
that's a question I need to be asked, because
right.
there is atonement for sins in the Bible,
Okay.
but there
And
was no atonement, and there was no offering on the earth that could remove death. That's
right.
the purpose. That's the whole idea. That doesn't mean that the temple did not have a place of worship that's legitimate.
Hmm.
It means that it's limited, and that the offerings only going back to sacred space, the offerings, the purpose of the Day of Atonement, for example, was actually to cleanse sacred space from the transgressions and the sins and the immorality of the people, to
Hmm.
cleanse sacred space. So Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection, and his blood cleanses the earth, God's sacred space, from death. That's why God will come in chapter 22 on the book of Genesis, Revelation. God himself will come down in chapter 21 and 22 after death is defeated. Defeated.
Right. Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes. And so it's not as though the earthly temple and Yeshua are in contrast. Is that what he accomplished was specific to the Mashiach, the Messiah, that his role and his job was different. Is that fair to say then?
That's absolutely right. And I can show it to you if you give me a second.
Sure.
In the book of Acts, chapter 13, it's talking about the resurrection.
Okay.
And in the resurrection, it says something really interesting. Beginning in verse 35, verse 36 says, "For David, after he has served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid with his fathers and saw corruption." Meaning he died and he died. He didn't resurrect.
Hmm.
But he whom God raised up, talking about the Messiah, did not see corruption. Now, verse 38 is important. "Let it be known to you, therefore, brothers, that through this man," that means Yeshua, "forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you." Now, what's interesting, brother, is that the word forgiveness in that text, you can look it up, don't believe anything I say,
Hmm.
is the Greek word aphesis. And the Greek word aphesis means a release from captivity, right? A release, and it used to be a medical term in ancient Greece. Aphesis, like letting of the blood, you know, or a remission of a sickness there was no cure for. What's really interesting is that that word aphesis is found 15 times in the New Testament. And that word in the Greek Septuagint is actually equivalent to jubilee,
Okay.
or the loss of release. So think about what it's doing, saying that the one who God sent, Yeshua, who resurrected, has released us from sins. That's what Hebrews 9:15 is telling you. Now watch. It says, "Let it be known to you, therefore, brothers, that through this man forgiveness or release,
Hmm.
remission of sins is proclaimed to you." And by him, everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you cannot be freed by the law of Moses.
Okay.
The law of Moses, in its beauty, in
Hmm.
its blessing to observe it as a covenantal obedience for blessings,
Hmm.
it could not provide the solution of removing death from the earth.
Right.
It could provide a solution for any connection with the death. You touch a dead person, you sprinkle the waters of purification, the
Right.
ashes of the red heifer, and then you can come in.
Right.
But it cannot remove death. And that's really the point of the book of Hebrews, and Romans chapter 8 tells you that
Hmm.
the law is weak in its what? That the purpose of removing death was not really solved in the earthly tabernacle. Yeshua did that by going to the heavenly tabernacle, and his blood, life for a life, and God accepts that as a ransom. But then you have to ask the question, why was it necessary to go to the heavenly tabernacle and not the earthly tabernacle?
Hmm.
Because human blood is not accepted on the altar on the earth.
Right.
It's only the animals. God prescribed it that way.
Yes.
If Yeshua's blood would have accepted on the altar on the earth, then there is no difference between the Messiah and all pagan religions.
Because that's an accusation that comes against Messiah as a human sacrifice.
Well, he's not a human sacrifice. That's it. He's a
Right.
ransom.
Right.
It's a big
Yes.
distinction because the
Right. Is that?
ransom is for many. He's using a legal language in the Greek. When you look that up in the Greek, I think it's polion, um, that he said ransom for many. He's using a legal language in that he is giving himself up
Hmm.
willingly doing it,
Right.
life for life. And the Torah does support that. Let me give you
Okay.
an example. Moses, when they worshiped the golden calf, that was a willful rebellion against God. That's
Mhm.
transgression.
Right.
Moses said, blot me out. He was willing to be a ransom for all the people, not to die. And then that's when God says the 13 attributes of the Lord, Adonai, Adonai, you know, merciful and all that stuff. And he says, I'll
Yeah.
forgive whom I want to forgive. So there
Yeah.
are biblical precedents in which one man who is a righteous man can be a ransom for the life of others.
Okay.
Something people don't really study very much, unfortunately. And when they present the Messiah, say human sacrifice. Oh Lord, that's an abomination in the Torah.
That's not good.
That's
Yeah.
not good at all. I mean, don't even say that. You're doing a disservice to the gospel when people mention that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that was what I was meaning, that that's an accusation thrown against believers.
Correct.
Okay. Um, yeah.
Am I
So
answering your questions okay?
yeah, it's going good. It's a lot of information. I'll have to make sure to rewatch a few times, but that's okay. That's why we're recording. It's good.
Sorry, man. I didn't mean to give you too much.
No, that's good. I like it. Um, Couple things there. Maybe we'll go here. So I've actually heard in a lecture, a teacher was saying the sacrifices or the temple system is kind of like God was just allowing it because the other cultures were doing so. How would you kind of speak to that?
Well, that makes no sense. I mean, just because the other nations are doing it doesn't mean that God is doing it to copy the world. He's actually outlining. I mean, in the book of Genesis, we already see that Noah dedicated the earth as sacred space to God by building an altar.
Hmm.
So who's to say the other nations are not copying what was already outlined through Noah?
Hmm.
I mean, understand the differences. When we
Yes.
understand the differences in the worship of God versus the worship of the Hittites and the Egyptians and the and the Canaanites. Oh my Lord, the Canaanites.
Hmm.
Fertility rituals and temple prostitution is all based on fertility.
Hmm.
So the temple now served as a complete contrast to show Israel the character of their God. You
Yes.
know, how he functions, how he wants to have communion with humanity. But you have to respect his sacred space. And you don't do it through fertility rituals. You
Right.
do it through different means. that are outlined strictly so that you'll never mix it. No syncretism. And once I understood that, it was like, wow, I get it. I understand what God is trying to do here. And it was
Hmm.
amazing, amazing
Right.
message.
Yeah, so it's that that was my understanding too, is that it would be better understood, I think, that the other cultures are a perversion of reality as opposed to a consensus of Yahweh just saying, okay, since you're used to this, like that doesn't make sense. They were used to a lot of things that they were not permitted to do, right? So, okay.
Well, but think about this though. Um, you have to we have to consider the contrast between them both. So you let's look at the Canaanites, for example.
Okay.
I mean, why a lamb? I mean, why a lamb for Passover? You can also eat a
Okay.
goat, but it's a
Right.
lamb. But why a lamb? Why the spring? Why does the calendar, the liturgical calendar for Israel, begins in the spring? Well, why is that? Why not in December? I mean, you have to ask that question. And
Hmm.
once you understand the question, then you'll grasp the contrast that God wants to convey to the people through the Israelites. He is using the Israelites as the vehicle of showing God's sacred space on the earth. They are holy, they are his people, and now the winter is death, and they have the motif in the Baal cycle, which is the Ugarit Baal cycle. You can read about this in the context of scripture books, context of scriptures. And when you study the Baal cycle and you realize that the religion of the Canaanites was based on death and the resurrection of Baal and how it happens. He dies in the winter. Clearly, it's a cosmos, it's a visual cosmology they're having.
Hmm.
It rains, but there's death, there's no fruit, there's nothing. Then the rains and the springs come, and when the rains come and the harvest is ready, that means that Baal has sex with the earth, and now the first fruits we're going to dedicate to Baal. And God says, "Excuse me, no, you're going to start in the spring, but you are going to set aside the barley, and you're going to bring it to my temple." And you are not going to eat of the new grain until that grain is presented on the altar. When the animals that are offered with that omer are presented on the altar, now you can eat the new grain. In other words, everyone now will know that it was God of Israel who provided the rain, that gave you the fruit, and is actually sanctified, and the whole nation of Israel would eat it only after the Omer
Okay.
was presented in the temple. What a great message! It's not Baal, it's the
Right.
God of Israel.
Okay.
That's only one example. Let me give you the next one. In the Baal cycle story, it tells you that Baal dies in the winter, he resurrects in the spring, he dies in the summer, he resurrects in the fall, and the cycle of dying, resurrecting, dying, resurrecting, dying, resurrecting. Well, it only happens once with Messiah. That's not happening more than that.
Right.
Okay? But what's interesting is that in the Baal cycle, in the story of how Baal died, it tells you that Mot, the god of the underworld in the Ugaritic religion, was devouring Baal as a sheep.
Okay.
And now you have a sheep being devoured by death, but then God raises up the sheep from the dead, which is Messiah. In other
Hmm.
words, what a contrast.
Right.
It's completely different. God is saying this is not your mythology. It doesn't exist. And he says, Israel, you're going to show them what is and what does. So
Okay.
that's what studying ancient Near Eastern culture has allowed me to really grasp and understand the beauty of the Bible, and how it's written is
Hmm.
way too perfectly done for it to be a hoax.
Right.
I mean, it's just when you start contrasting with other religions in the ancient world, the message is clear, it's
Hmm.
concise, and it's consistent.
Right.
God is life, he destroys death, and he will honor those who honor him.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Um, okay. Another question here. I believe. if I'm not misremembering here, Yeshua cleansing the heavenly temple. Am I remember? Is that in
Yes,
here?
in Hebrews 9, 9
So
and 10.
my question is, why does the heavenly temple need cleansing?
Well, that's a great question that I don't know the answer to, that I've also
Okay.
asked myself,
Okay.
because it's giving you an impression that it was defiled.
Mm-hmm.
But how?
Right.
Could it be possible that, you know, something happened in the heavenly realm in which there was some kind of transgression? We don't know.
Hmm.
I mean, this is it's a very good question that I was asking myself 2 weeks ago because I was
Okay.
going through it. I'm thinking, wait a minute, it's giving me the impression that there was a defilement, or maybe remember that the earthly is a copy of the heavenly.
Right.
Maybe something that Mary Douglas and also Wenham and some of the scholars says contagion. Jacob Milgram uses that too,
Okay.
in that if the earthly tabernacle is a copy, then whatever defiles this one defiles that one.
Right.
So
Hmm.
that's the only answer I have for you. That's a
So,
very intriguing question that I don't really have a clear answer. And if I don't know, I don't know,
okay. So, but that almost to me starts to sound like even on the earthly realm, so to speak, that this is cosmic warfare. Like,
Oh, well, what is?
right? So that would make sense, that line
Well,
of
it
thinking.
is.
Right.
That's why it says because God so loved the cosmos.
Okay.
I mean, have you ever studied ancient cosmology?
Probably not too much.
Man, yeah, I hope you do, because when I began to study ancient Near Eastern cosmology, and then I began to contrast that with God's worldview of cosmology, man,
Okay.
talk about even creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Hmm.
So it sounds kind of redundant that in the next verse says, and the earth was empty and void, chaos and disorder. And
Right.
then it says the Spirit of God hovered over the waters of the sea. But it makes no sense. He just told you he created the heavens and the earth. And
Right.
it's clear that in the earth there's water. So why
Yes.
does it have to say that the Spirit of God hovered over the waters of the sea? Well, the word Tiamat was the god of the underworld in the Mesopotamian motif.
Okay.
Marduk
I
was the
have
god
looked a
of their
little bit.
creation. Enuma Elish.
Yeah, I've looked a bit of into that type of thing. Yes. Okay.
Right.
But carry
So
on.
that
Yes.
so then you have a contrast in creation. God has the a spirit hovering over the waters of the deep, Tehom.
Hmm.
And then you have Rahab, Rav, Leviathan, the serpent, the dragon. All those are synonymous with the underworld, the deep.
Hmm.
And then now God is saying in creation that he has dominion over the underworld.
Yeah.
Now, in the ancient Near East, when a king would conquer the sea, then he will be proclaimed as the king of creation.
Okay.
That's a very important topic,
Hmm.
because then when you read the story of Noah, it makes sense why God chose a flood and how he stopped the flood after 40 days, the rains after 40 days.
Hmm.
And then it's interesting that in Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, I think, and verse 13, it's telling you when the ark rested on the Mount of Ararat. Now, if you go to the original calendar, which was from Tishri to Tishri, it tells you that the ark rested on the 17th day of the seventh month. Well, that day in history is actually the resurrection of Messiah.
Okay. Wow.
So then, when Noah comes out of the ark, he comes out on the first day of the first month. Well, that's Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets.
Okay.
That's why it's an enthronement ceremony.
Hmm.
So we see the blueprint there. There's a
Right.
cosmic battle between God and creation. He propels a flood, divine judgment, and then he defeats the end. They're all drowned, means they're all guilty, just like in the Exodus.
Right.
That's why they threw the baby in the water. That's why Jonah was asking them to throw them in the water. Now I know why Yeshua had to walk on water.
Hmm.
So he was bringing the message of God, saying that the God of Israel has dominion over the underworld. And then
Right.
God gave the keys to Yeshua of Hades. That's why we have resurrection. The message is one.
Hmm. And then in Revelation, the sea is no more, right?
The chaos, exactly, because
Right.
sea represents the chaos. Sea will be no more. And then verse 4 tells you, and death will be no more, citing
Mhm.
Isaiah 28, verse 5, 25,
Wow.
verse 8.
It all works, eh?
It all works, man. It's incredible how it does. But you have to consider looking into historical context. Then you have to understand culture and then the motifs behind the storyline. When people see a miracle of Yeshua, they see the miracle. They want to duplicate the miracle. Everyone wants the miracles.
Hmm.
But what's the message behind the miracle? What is
Right.
he trying to tell us?
Yeah.
What was this message about healing the leper when lepers were not easily healed? You know, resurrecting Lazarus on the fourth day instead of waiting on the third. All of
Hmm.
that has a message.
Okay. More to dig into.
Yes, sir.
Um, okay, so maybe one more area here, if we could.
Sure.
So when Yeshua refers to his body as the temple, and then the believers are the temple. Paul says our body, we are part of the body, and we're part of the temple of the Holy Spirit. That would make a sacred space. Is it?
Us, yes.
Yes. So, and is that so when Yeshua is saying he'll go and he'll prepare a place, like, so as the priest, is he preparing us as sacred space? Is that what happened to for because when you even just looking a little bit into temple and sacred space, and then I remember years ago having the thought like, wow, like, and the spirit dwells in me. It's like I feel like unworthy. Like how did this happen? When you does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately we do not understand how to maintain sacred space sacred. For example, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. He's not talking to the individual. He's talking to the collective unit of the community in Corinth.
Okay.
And they're dealing with what? They're dealing with idolatry, eating meat sacrificed to idols. One guy sleeping with his mom,
Hmm.
stepmom.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that are moral in nature, immoral in nature.
Hmm.
And then he reminds them in chapter 3, verse 16, don't you know that you're the temple of God? Well, he's not
Hmm.
talking to the individual. He's talking to the whole community,
At the body.
the whole body that's there in Corinth. Now, it's interesting that people want to call themselves the temple of God,
Hmm.
but they don't realize or they don't know how to keep that temple sacred space. Now, the Bible is quite clear that, and there was a whole episode with the Antiochus Epiphanes, that he placed a pig on the altar, and they had to get rid of the altar because
Right.
it was defiled.
Yeah.
So then I asked the question to the audience: if you are proclaiming to call yourself a temple, are you eating pork? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say the temple of God is no longer valid because now I'm the temple. But then you're doing to yourself what God already said not to do. Don't eat that. And then in the temple, when someone placed it on the altar, there was war, and then they had to destroy that altar and rebuild it. I mean,
Hmm.
we have to understand that the temple is a microcosm of teaching us how to be sacred space, how to stay away from the realm of death. And that's why certain things are prohibited from eating, like
Right.
shellfish and scavengers. What do? They eat the trash, they eat the
Mhm.
dead. So now, if God wants to convey to you that you are a kingdom of life, why would He let you eat animals that all they do, they're scavengers? They're
Mhm.
eating. That's why those animals were very much worshipped in the underworld religions, because
Okay.
the animals represented whom they worshipped.
Hmm.
And then
Well,
you don't want to be what you're eating.
okay. Yeah. So again, coming back to death and life, right?
That's what I'm telling you. The whole message is only
Yeah.
one. It's really fascinating.
And that's what he's in Deuteronomy. Choose life, right? Death and life are put before you. Choose life. Wow. Yeah. So that's awesome. Okay, is there, I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up. Is there anything that I missed that I should have asked you on this topic that you can think of that would make things more clear or?
Well, I think that understanding the basic structures of what sacred space is. For example, this is my Bible. It's not reading because it has big letters. I don't
Okay.
travel with this. I don't travel with this one, but
Hmm.
this is my Bible. Okay.
Right.
So if I take this Bible with me anywhere, no one uses it unless I make it common. Hey guys, if you need to read a Bible, I brought my Bible. You can use it. Then
Yeah.
anyone can feel free to touch it, take it, open it, read it. They can go through it because I gave permission.
Right.
Basically, I said from set aside for my use only. That's the definition of holiness.
Right.
Set aside to profane or common.
Okay.
We don't know those terms. We do not understand it. But yet, if I go to your house as an invited guest and I start walking around your house as a guest, and then I go lay down in your bed,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be highly offended.
Yeah. Crossing some lines.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
we understand sacred space in our own domain. In Florida, if you cross my threshold, unannounced, we can defend ourselves.
Right.
You know, so in the temple is the same way. If you cross a threshold and you're not part of a covenantal relationship with our God, that is encroaching on holy things. The
Hmm.
penalty was cut off.
Okay.
They understood these things. It's just like my fence. Someone can cross over if it's opened, okay, what do you need? How can I help you? But if it's closed, they jump over, they bring in a bat in their hands. We
Right.
have gun laws here that I'm able to defend my property.
Right.
But every culture that does not have that, they don't understand the principles of holiness in the Bible. Muslims
Okay.
understand it. That's why they take off their shoes when they
Hmm.
go pray in their mosque.
Right.
That's why they do certain things that are very peculiar because
Hmm.
they're Middle Eastern people. Unfortunately, in the West, we're not really grasping these things, and on the resistance to study the temple, it also adds to the confusion of many people.
Hmm. Okay. And so where can people find you, or if they want to get more from you and learn from you, where could they be directed?
Yeah, thank you for asking. You can go to Wisdom in Torah, Wisdom in Torah.com, and you can subscribe to my page. Or you can also go to Facebook, on Facebook or YouTube, Wisdom and Torah Ministries on YouTube, or you can put in my name. And then I have teachings there, and I pray that they're a blessing to you. I also
Okay.
take tours to Israel, and I'm going to be taking a tour to Asia Minor, to the cities of, I think, like 4 of the 7 churches, Greece. And we're going to be in Greece,
Okay.
Athens, Cenchrea, and Corinth. So if you're interested, please reach out to us and sign up. We're gonna really have a good time there learning about what Paul said.
Oh, nice. And when are you going to Greece?
Well, right now we're planning it for October of next year,
Okay.
and December, hopefully by the end of March of this coming year.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I'll put some of those links you mentioned in the descriptions as well, so people can find you and learn more. And thank you very much for your time and joining me today.
It is an honor. Thank you for asking me, and I hope that if you ever want to do something else, I'm going to Israel Monday, so I have more information to bring you to. Let me know, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with the audience. Thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.